Welcome to Language Surfers Podcast, a space with fresh waves for the mind, dedicated to create a platform where professionals from both language industry and academia can share their professional experiences, and where we also explore different career paths at different stages.
My guest today is Irina Marina Bortoi. She works as a senior associate language specialist at RWS Group, but she's also a literary translator, collaborating with various publishing houses. She translates fiction, practical psychology, memoirs, and many other genres. Irina has a bachelor's degree in translation, interpreting, and terminology, and also a Master of Arts in the translation of the contemporary literary text from the University of Bucharest. In this episode, she's going to share with us her passion about literary translation and how she's able to maintain it while at the same time having a full-time job at RWS Group. Irina, thank you so much for accepting the invitation, and I'm really honored to have you as a guest of the podcast.
Hi, Anka. Thank you for having me, and it's really nice to be here as well.
Thank you so much for your time. And as we start into this interview where you would share your professional experiences, from the brief introduction, I saw that you had it clear that you wanted to study translation and get involved in something professionally related with languages. So, could you please briefly explain how and when did you realize you really like languages and you wanted to start not only your academic background but also your professional journey in this field?
Yes, I actually started learning foreign languages when I was in kindergarten. We studied Spanish, and then in the third grade, my parents decided to uh, enroll me into a private foreign languages school to study English. Before I would study it in school, I was still learning Spanish in elementary school, and I really liked it. And they started buying me books in English, and I remember a particular one. It was a Disney version of Pocahontas that I received as a gift when I was about 10, and I still have that that book. I used to copy words from the dictionary uh, to understand everything, because obviously I was a beginner, and that was the only way to learn how to read it. And I would write the translations of the words or phrases or verbs or whatever, like he said. I was like, okay, what does he said mean? And I wrote it in pencil in that book. And it seemed to me such an interesting exercise that somehow in the back of my mind it remained with me. And then as I got older and understood that there is this profession that of translators, I definitely knew that was what I wanted to do uh, as a career. So even when I applied for high school, I chose a philology class, and then when I took my exams to get into a university, I only chose foreign languages. Like, unlike many of my high school colleagues who would pick at least three faculties or three different schools, just to get into one. That was the fashion at the time, to make sure you have an option, even if it's just a backup option and not what you really want to do. But that was what I knew I wanted to do, and that was the only thing I chose. And I still like it as much, if not even, if not more. Um, and I don't regret the single day that I chose this field.
Yeah, then you're really fortunate, right? Because first of all, you didn't have to make a really difficult decision on what you would like to study, and then even after years, you still enjoy what you're doing. So that's a fortunate. Fortunate, but obviously you've put a lot of effort into studying and getting where you are today.
Yes, that's because I love learning in every possible way. And It's probably one of the things I love most about being a translator, that you always learn something new. Like every day I translate something, I learn something new, even if it's something minor or something like huge about a country or a regime that I didn't know anything about. That's that's really what I love about it, and uh, I'm pretty sure this is what has contributed to my success, if you want to call it like that.
Yes, definitely. And also, based on your studies, after you finished your bachelor's degree in translation and interpreting and terminology, you decided to do a master's degree in translation of contemporary literary text. So it was clear for you that you also wanted to get even more knowledge on this literary specialization of the translation industry, right?
Yes, uh, because I studied translation theory from the times that I was doing my BA thesis, and I discovered how interesting theory really is. And obviously, much of the theory can be applied to literary translation as well. So I knew that a master's in the field of literary translation would be would be the natural choice. And I'm very fortunate that this particular master's program is a very successful one and a very sought after one. And at the University of Bucharest, a very um, popular program. And I know a lot of people I've met later on in my career that have done this MA. So uh, obviously, uh, many of us can be wrong about it, and I learned a lot of additional things that really helped me enter the field later on.
Yeah, and talking about entering the field as a literary translator, is it difficult? What advice would you give to someone who would like to start in the field of literary translation? How was it for you? And now, with the experience that you have, what kind of tips can you share with any of us who would like to start in this field?
Well, what I did to start was that uh, when I was still doing my master studies, I answered a Facebook post that was looking for English translators. It was a post by one of the editors of a publishing house that I'm still working with. So I sent my resume and I took a test. That was the first novel I translated that actually became published. And this is the approach that I followed with most of the publishing houses that I worked with later. Um, I still do it. I'm still trying to reach new clients because, in the end, publishing houses are my clients. Um, I was also recommended a few times, and I started working with different publishing houses this way. Um, but this is what I advise everyone that comes to me and asks, how do you start? How do you get in touch with people? Just send emails, and many publishing houses who still um, need translators and who publish a lot of books in translation need new people. So you will probably get a test to translate. That's a few pages. Um, Sometimes it's from a book that the publishing house already wants to publish but has not assigned it to someone yet. Sometimes it's an existing translation and they want to um, see, I don't know, maybe compare it to what their um, accepted version is. And this happened to me once, but the translations were not published. So they were done by someone, but the books um, were still being printed. So I couldn't like just go to the bookstore and see how I should translate that. It was Um, it depends from one publishing house to the next, and um, the one constant is the test. You will most likely do a test, especially when you're a beginner.
And talking from your experience, do you have an idea of how many books have you translated so far?
Yes, last year passed. I translated my 100 book, and I'm currently at about 105, I think. Most of them are published. Some of them are still being printed or are going to be published soon. um, but yeah, and I've translated a lot of different genres, like you said at the beginning, like fiction, um, food, travel literature, children's literature, uh, a few good dozens of those 100 books are children's books that are uh, much shorter. So I don't work 18 hours a day. Sometimes I had really short books to translate, but I can tell you they're not easy just because they're 20 pages. That's sometimes children's literature is really difficult to translate. I also did um, sociology, political philosophy, and erotica even a few years ago. What I haven't translated is poetry, and I'm probably not going to do it anytime soon. I don't feel like I have um, that poetic vein inside me. I don't I don't find it very easy, and I'd rather stick to something that I know I'm good at and I'm getting better at with every book that I finish.
And considering the wide range of genres that you're translating, is it because you really feel comfortable and you like everything that you translate? Do you have the option to select or, say, yes, I would like to translate this, but maybe you say no to some other type of genres? Has this evolved throughout your experience? The selection criteria from your side as a literary translator?
Yes, the criteria have changed a bit with time. At the beginning, obviously, I would accept anything and everything just to build a portfolio and to gain experience. And as time went by, I started to drop some of the things that I didn't like that much, like political philosophy, for instance. Um, it's not because it was difficult, uh, but it was not a subject that I was very much interested in,
Mhm.
even though the books I got to translate sometimes were pretty insightful. Um, I also developed my capacity to refuse, to refuse books when I had already too much on my plate. In the beginning, I used to work on two or three books at a time, but with time, I try to um, only focus on a single one or have like two books overlap, but for a very short period of time. Sometimes when I do my self review at the end, um, and that would overlap with the beginning of a fresh translation. Um, it happened that I refused a book on chess because I don't play chess and I don't know how to play chess. So obviously I couldn't translate the handbook of chess if I don't understand. I think um, that's one of the main principles I try to abide by in my career. Like, don't don't do something that you don't understand, because then obviously the output um, won't be good. Like, yeah, I could use a dictionary and do some minimal research on chess, but obviously if it's not something I do, or something that I still have any idea about, it won't be it won't be something that I'd be satisfied with. And I've also turned down some projects that I found were somehow contradictory to my values, and I won't name them, but it's something that I felt at that point that I was sufficiently um, established to refuse, and um, I'm not sorry I did it.
Yeah, exactly. Because as you all say, you could perfectly translate from a field you're not very comfortable with, because in the end you're a professional translator. But maybe the energy you have to spend and enjoying the translation process is not the same when you would translate, as you all said, a chess related book, compared to, I don't know, something related to traveling.
Yes, and that's exactly what happens when I translate something that I truly enjoy, like even fiction. Yeah, some books I like better than others. That's normal.
Yeah.
And with fiction, I usually accept uh, almost all of the projects that I get. I turn them down only if I'm not I don't have the time. But you can tell. I think you can tell in my translation, or at least I can tell when I really really enjoy the book, because then the translation is better. I think it. I work faster in the first place. I maybe I have to research less, um, and I get to spend more time on um, improving the style at the end. But yeah, you can definitely tell. And uh, luckily, in the past few years, I've had a lot of books that I really enjoyed, um, and I'm very grateful for that. I still haven't got to the point where I could choose, um, like, go to a publishing house and say, "Hey, I want to translate this author. Could you please, get the rights and make it happen?" That hasn't happened yet. Um, but usually in the past few years, and I think that came with the the development of the relationship between me and the editors from the publishing houses that I've worked with for many books now, um, has got to the point where I think they know what I'm best with, and they propose books uh, that I could know beforehand that I'd be a good fit for. Uh, that was the case with a new author, Jennifer Saint, who writes historical reinterpretations. That kind of a very fashionable style that's trending right now, with feminine reinterpretation of uh, mythology. And I was offered her first two books. They were Electra and Ariadne, and I knew, like, from the time that I read the blurb, like, this is what the book is about. Sometimes I can tell, like, even before I read the book, that I'm going to enjoy it, and I say yes, I really I really want to do this. And in the end, with these particular two books, the result has been very well received. She's a very good she's very good with language, with descriptions, um, with this style, and I tried to convey it, and I was very happy that I could get it right, get the voice right from the very beginning. Sometimes I struggle with that in the first chapter or first two chapters, like, until I get uh, the tone right, the characters right. But sometimes it flows right from the start, and many of the reviews I've read about these books praise the language. and the language obviously in translation. So I'm glad that I was able to capture this defining trait of the author in the end.
Yes, exactly. Because in the end, as a translator, you're the voice of the author in a different language, right? And talking about the books that you've translated, you mentioned a lot children's literature, memoirs, and I think I personally would like to discuss one of your achievements because I personally consider it as achievement in your life as a professional translator, literary professional translator. You had a chance to translate Nadia Murad, her book
Yes,
The Last Girl in 2018. She was the winner of the Nobel Prize. So I think this is really a milestone in the professional life of any literary translator. How did you get the chance to translate this book? And is it an important milestone in your career?
it is. Yes. Obviously, when I got the book, she still hadn't received the prize, but I had worked before um, at the company I was employed with. The first company I worked with, they were working for UNHCR, the United Nations Office for Refugees in Romania, and I worked a lot. Like I translated hundreds of pages on um, migrants, refugees, country reports, or a lot of related stuff. And I found that I really enjoyed the subject. And at some point, I sent a resume to one of to a new publishing house, and I received two books. The first two books I got from them were two books by refugees. The first was Nujin, by a Syrian girl who has cerebral palsy and moves to Germany and travels to Germany in a wheelchair, um, which is a very bright and optimistic view on life. Like that book really, you might say, oh, it's about a disabled refugee from Syria. What can be happy about it? No, her perspective is truly optimistic and positive. And the second book I got this was Nadia Murad's memoir, and I think that the reason why I was so good with translating these two books was my previous experience with UNHCR, and this particular book is a very grim perspective on the Yazidis and their plight, and um, basically Nadia and her family and the women in her um, the Yazidi women were captured and taken by the Islamic State to be sex slaves. So obviously, the memoir is not a pretty read. It was very difficult at times, and every time I would try to detach myself and think, yeah, okay, well, it's not just a book. That's the thing. It's not just a book, and even if it's not something that happens like right at our borders, like the war with Ukraine, um, it's still something that happens in this world and that was still ongoing at the time. So when she won the Nobel Prize the next year, I remember I was in the kitchen at the office where I was working at the time, and like I do every year, I was listening to the Nobel Prize announcements. I do this for literature and for peace. For the rest, I just read the news. And when I heard her name, I remember like my heart skipped a beat, and I was like, "Hey, I translated her book! Oh my god!" um, I was very excited, and I realized that from that moment on, maybe that would be um, something that would maybe recommend me.
Mhm.
I don't know if this happened, if this was the case, but having a Nobel Prize winner under your belt is something. Um, and I had the chance to travel to Oslo that same year, and when I visited the Nobel Prize Center, there was uh, her accepting speech like all over the walls and everywhere, and I was like, "Hey, I know this girl through the book that I translated." So yeah, it really means a lot to me, and um, I'm still very proud of this book, and I actually have it right here with me. This is the Romanian cover of The Last Girl. It's called Eu voi fi ultima in Romanian, and the full title is The Last Girl: My Story of Captivity and My Fight Against the Islamic State.
Yeah, definitely. This is an important moment in your career. And especially as you all say, it's as a translator, when you have to translate, you have to emotionally detach, especially when it comes to translating memoirs, right? And could you describe how is the relationship with the authors? Do you have the chance to communicate directly with them? Well, depending on what type of book are you reading and whether the author is still alive, obviously. Do you have this chance to communicate directly with them, or is it just the relationship with the publishing house?
I never got the chance to talk to them directly as I was working,
Mm-hmm.
mostly because I mm, never felt like I had quite enough questions for them to be worth bothering them. But I did have the chance to just chat on Facebook with two of the authors I've translated and said, "Hey, I really enjoyed your book. I'm the translator into Romanian, and I loved it." And obviously, this was mostly with books I truly enjoyed translating, and books that have somehow become my favorites over the years. So mm that hasn't happened yet, um, but you know, maybe it will at some point. I'd love to talk to some of the authors I've translated. I find Erika Fatland very fascinating. She's a Norwegian sociologist who wrote a few travel books, two of which I've translated into Romanian, The Border and the Sovietistan. And her approach to these travelogues is very complex and unique. Like her books are a lesson in history, in culture, in gastronomy, in sociology, in politics, um, everything without getting you bored. Like for a single page, and her books are huge. Like she has like 500, 600 pages, and you never get bored. And what's more interesting, and what I love probably the most about translating travel books, is uh, getting lost in research. I love looking up on Google, like how do these places look like in real in 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 reality, like in colors and not just in words. Mostly because the books I translated by her were about countries I don't think I'll ever get to visit. Sovietistan is about five of the former USSR republics. It's Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and I always forget the fifth one. But that's how I found out like the beauty that is Uzbekistan's religious buildings, those that are very turquoise colored, and um, there was also this description about a place that was very lush and green, and this is the capital, and it's not just um, concrete and huge flag posts like in uh, the other country, but this one is like wide boulevards, a lot of trees, a lot of grass, a lot of parks, and I was like, hey, I want to see this. So uh, I really enjoy this, and I don't think that's wasted time at all. Like, I think it only makes me translate better and immerse myself better in the atmosphere of the books that I translate. And then uh, because I've seen these things, I can convey it better and make it uh, more attractive to the reader as well.
Yeah, definitely. You have a different type of travel, right, through the books of the
Yeah,
authors.
exactly.
That's your experience as a translator. And going back to the relationship with the publishing houses, um, is it difficult? For example, do you have to negotiate the deadlines for the books? Do you normally need extensions, or could you just give us more insights into how is the relationship with the publishing house?
Well, usually I'm proposed a book,
Hmm.
and I said, okay, yes, this sounds interesting. I have the time. And then they say, okay, give us a deadline. And I'm like, okay, I do some math based on how many pages it has, what the topic is, like if it's just um, sometimes sometimes you fail and sometimes you get uh, surprises in the middle of the book, and you find out that it takes a bit longer in some parts, but sometimes it takes you less in other parts, and eventually it all evens out. So I usually try to set a date, or like, I don't know, say it's three. For instance, when I have something um, ongoing, I already work on something from that particular publishing house. I say, okay, suppose I don't start when just the day I finish the other one, maybe they will overlap, or this is actually the case now with a book that they might want to publish in the autumn in one of the book fairs. So I'll have to start it a bit earlier than just the day I finished the book that I'm working on now for the same publishing house. So then I say, yeah, I could do this in 3.5 months, or 3 months, or 4 months, or it depends. I usually don't need extensions, and when I do, I make sure to ask for them in due time. Like, it never happened to me that the deadline is tomorrow, and I say I need 2 more weeks. Like, and yeah, 2 more weeks I think is the maximum uh, that I asked for sometimes. And that was when I had a lot of books going on at the same time. So I try not to do that anymore, and just, maybe if I was silly enough to put the deadline on a Saturday, I just say, hey, can I deliver on Monday or something like that. Um, but mostly I don't, and I was very surprised to find out that not everybody does that. I was very um, shocked when a new publishing house said, "Oh my God!" And you, yeah, this looks nice. When we just read it like diagonally, and you actually respected the deadline, and I'm like, "Yeah, isn't that normal? Isn't that what everybody does?" But no, you'd be surprised, and I was surprised that. Um, I've heard a lot of stories like from people who never even bothered to turn out the book. And the deadline comes and the editor is like, hey, So what's going on? Oh, I decided I'm not doing it anymore. And to me, that's just something completely unprofessional and
Yeah.
unimaginable. Like I could never do something like that. And we always like whenever I needed an extension, I received it because I was like the editors were understanding and they could offer it to me. Like I maybe if I had worked on Spare or other books that or Barack Obama's books, for instance, maybe the case would have been different because those were published at the same time.
Mm.
If I'm not sure about Spare, but Barack Obama's I think was very very close to the American release date. So maybe that would have been different, but in my cases it was acceptable. But it's not something I do. Uh, not even a quarter of the times. So only when it's really necessary. Like I prefer to just um, work a few extra hours on the weekends and just do it in time rather than prolonging it when I could do it like with a little push.
Yeah, and I think that what's also really interesting about your career, and I would like to go into this aspect as well, because we were former colleagues at SDL RWS, and basically your full-time job is not as a literary translator, right? We could talk about literary translation for hours and days because this is simply your passion, but your full-time job is as a translator in a corporate company, and you specialized in life sciences as well because that's how we met. But could you just let us know how do you handle to have a full-time job but at a company, but at the same time translate so many books? No doubt this is your passion, but how do you handle, having a full-time job with this passion of yours?
Well, this is what everybody asks, like even people from the company and my managers ask that, and everybody, like my colleagues and new people I get to know, and they're like, how do you do it? Well, first of all, both are doing what I love. Yeah,
Mm.
I translate every day, all day, every day. Um, so that's a plus. Like maybe if I had a job that completely drained me or that was completely unsatisfactory, mm, maybe I wouldn't be in the right mental state at the end of the working hours to uh, translate for another 1 hour, 2 hours, maybe 3 hours. That's very rare on weekdays, but sometimes it happens. Like maybe um, if I have very good productivity and I'm in the flow and I don't want to just stop because 2 hours have passed. Sometimes I work a bit more. Mm, so this is one. Um, I'm also mostly a very organized person and good with time management. So I think that also helps because probably what beginners would find difficult is how much time do I need to translate this book? Uh, Obviously, in the beginning, I was given a deadline. Yeah. So when I was given a deadline, I what my approach was, okay, so I have, I don't know, say 260 pages, and I have 3 months for it. How many working days are in 3 months? Uh, are there holidays? Am I going to be on vacation? Is it, I don't know, is it Easter? Is it my summer holiday? Is it overlapping with something else I'm doing that is very time consuming? Uh, so I divided the number of pages that the book had on the number of days that I had. And that was like, that's how I found out, my rhythm. And that's how I started um, developing it. Like, I would say, yeah, so I have to do. 3 pages per day, or 3.5 pages per day, or 2 pages per day. I don't know. Um, and that helped me, like, doing this from the beginning, and with time learning to estimate beforehand how long a certain text is going to take me, or how, obviously, there, like I said, there could still be surprises and unexpected, um, maybe terminology issues, or um, things to research. But usually, and especially after I read the book, because I usually like to read the entire book before translating, or right at the beginning. It's I always spend a few days just reading that book, and really getting into the atmosphere, and capturing the voices, and understanding the characters, and how they interact, and how they speak. That's when when vocabulary is important. um, so that this kind of organizing my time uh, is really useful. And when I see that maybe a translation is more difficult than I anticipated, or maybe when it's easier, yeah. For instance, travel books, I I could work much faster than fiction, and definitely much faster than philosophy. um, then I can juggle a bit with my time. Yeah, so I say, okay, so today I had to do 3 pages, but I did five. Okay, that means I'm not working as much at the weekend, or I'm not working at all at the weekend. I'm just taking the weekend off and going traveling or something like that. Um, so that's what I do. And I also, in the past 2 years mostly, um, I try to only choose as much as I can handle without having to actually work every day. Like I try to uh, work less on books, because that's how I can focus better on each and every one. And rather than translating 6 or 7 books a year, I found that, okay, four is good, five is good, if they're much better um, than they would have been if I had uh, overlapped them with something else. And I also make sure to um, leave a lot of time if the book is difficult and I need a lot of time to review it at the end.
Mhm.
Um, and also when I know I'm going to have busier times at work, at my 9 to 5, like in the summer when mm, some colleagues are on holiday and we have to do backup, and then I know uh, I'm probably going to do overtime a few days that month, or several days that month. Then I try to leave less, maybe. So I know August is going to be difficult. Okay, in August I'm trying not to mm, push too much on literary translation, because uh, like I said, you need to have to be in the right mental state to do it. You need to be creative, and if you're completely drained from work, even if it's something that you like if you already worked 10 hours that day, you're not going to translate literature after hours. You're just going to uh, lie down and just read a book, or watch some TV, or do something different that doesn't, you know, um, that isn't as demanding intellectually as translation.
And talking about the other part where you have a full time job, so I know that you specialized in the life sciences vertical.
And previously, you mentioned the initial the at the beginning of this presentation that you previously worked on migration, I mean materials related to migrants. What's your perspective? Should a translator get to be specialized in a particular field? Is it difficult? Would you recommend someone to be more general rather than getting into a special field?
Well, I think a single field is too little, and a lot of fields is too much. So you need to find that balance between diversity and how much you can learn and develop continuously in each of those fields, because I truly believe in continuing development and then lifelong learning. So basically that's how you advance in your career. That's how you get better clients, higher paying clients, high end jobs. um, so definitely choosing a few fields, preferably that you like, so that you won't get bored in 5 years. Like I could do legal translations, but I don't understand the thing. So why would I do that and hate my life in 2 years? Um, so just choose something you already have an interest in, and maybe develop around that, or choose, I don't know, maybe completely different ones, but still um, areas that you still find interesting enough to keep learning about them, like I did with pharmaceuticals. And literary translations is not the same, but they're both areas that I'm really interested in, and I don't find it boring to read blog articles, or um, just do research uh, to expand my knowledge, first of all in the source language, but obviously in the target language as well. um, so I try to keep up to date with that. And so yeah, I would say stick to just a few fields, because the saying, it's jack of all trades and master of none. So I don't believe in people who say they can do it all. You can, but not everything will be good. It's like a restaurant with a 30-page menu. Not everything you buy from that place is going to be the best. So just
Yes, exactly. And in the end, if you choose two or three fields, for example, you still need a lot of time and energy to to evolve, right? To stay in contact with the trends, with the terminology. If you talk about life sciences, that's a lot of clinical trials or different, methodologies or clinical approaches being developed because it evolves together with how health sciences evolves. So, as a translator, you have to always take the time and the energy to keep the pace.
yeah, not everybody does that, but I find that the most successful people do, and that's what I try to do as well. And obviously, that like I said from in the beginning, that comes from my deep love of learning. So I try to stay up to date. And actually, this past month, I attended my first translators conference. I went to translate Cluj, which had been much um, v- very much recommended from everyone who attended before. But obviously, until you try it, you say, ah, come on, it can't be that good. But it was that good. And um, it opened up my appetite for other translators conferences. um, so I'm already planning where to go to next year. um, I also read blogs, articles, not just articles about translation per se, or transcreation, which I'm um, trying to get to medium term. Um, but also, I like to read about new developments in the fields that I translate from. Like I also translate practical psychology, and until I graduate to real to clinical psychology. I like to read a lot on the subject, like on what are the newest trends in therapy, um, what are the things we now talk about that we didn't talk about 50 years ago, like like trauma was not popular 50 years ago. Nobody talked about trauma or vulnerability or the inner child, uh, which all of these are um, topics that have become um, very much discussed in recent years, and not just in the field itself, but also in translation. That there have been a lot of books translated about these subjects. So obviously, I like to keep up to date with that as well. And I have to admit that I also learn a lot at work, because I think I can safely say that the company I work for is a trendsetter in technology, at least. So I'm always up to date with the newest trends, like neural machine translation, the newest tools. Working with so many clients who have different preferences, I I got to work with numerous cat tools, um, so um, I can say um, I've gone from knowing absolutely no cat tool 3 years ago when I joined SDL to now working with a lot of them. And there are still lots more to be discovered and um, to work with. But I keeping up to date and continuing professional development is something that I find very important, and I try to make the time to do it, even if it's just attending an online webinar or reading a 5 minute article on something. Um, I try to do it because I think it's the only way we can advance. Yeah, otherwise I can just translate mechanically, not care about learning or um, getting in touch with the times. Yeah, um, that's very important to me, and like I said, I always try to make time for it.
Yeah, I really love the conversation with you because from the moment I met you and I found out about your career path, I really admire you, and I think that you are a role model for most of us. And I'm sure that many people listening to the podcast will be inspired and will get, some answers in their decision taking process, whether to choose one path or the other one. But sometimes you just are the clear example that you can sometimes do both of them and you don't have to choose between A and B, but rather find the balance and combine them. So I think that's extremely the main takeaway I take from your personal career. And thank you so much for your time to share with us. And just to as a conclusion and to sum up from your perspective, which would be the main keywords or concepts that you would recommend to anyone starting their career or wanting, to pivot to make a change in their career from your experience?
Keywords, probably
Or
learning.
skills and requirements that you developed over the time and you consider that they really were the the ones that helped you advance in your career?
Learning, definitely. Learning has helped a lot, and paying attention to what you translate and um, letting it come to you. Yeah, I could have translated 500 pages for UNHCR and not care about anything. And then when I got uh, a refugee's memoir, I would just treat it as any other text translate, but if you don't let all this knowledge come to you, and um, if you don't immerse yourself in it, um, I think the output is of lesser quality. So definitely learning, perseverance, not just in literary translation, but in every field. Just try, fail, and do better. you know, and maybe try to find your passion, which doesn't necessarily have to come as soon as you finish school. I had a colleague in my master's class who was older than me, I think at least 10 years older than me, who worked in finance and who did this MA in literary translation, because she was like, okay, I'm not going to give up finance, I'm not going to give up my position in the bank, but I love this and I want to learn how to do it. And a few years later, after discussing with me and asking, okay, how did you start, what should I do, uh, she's now published a few uh, books of her own, a few translations of her own in practical psychology, and I'm always very pleased when I see her, post a new cover on Facebook. I'm like, hey, you did it again! Good for you! You can still do it, like at any age, and I don't think that's something that should be limited to, you turn 18 and you have to know what you're going to do. No, because sometimes school doesn't let you find out, or you don't have the necessary opportunities. But the thing is, you can find your passion at any age, and it's never too late. It's literally never too late. If you love learning and um, you find your passion, you can do it.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice, exactly, because you don't have to feel frustrated because whenever you finish high school or your bachelor's degree, you don't know exactly what you would like to do. It doesn't mean that it ends there. It's just a continuous process.
And I don't think you should see the years that you spent doing something else as wasted years. You've learned something from that experience as well. I'm sure that my colleague who works in a bank has learned a lot of stuff about banking, and maybe, you know, she'll translate a practical psychology book, or she'll translate a finance book, and then all the things that she already knows will help. So in the end, nothing you experience and nothing you learn uh, is wasted. So
Yeah, exactly. It,
everything
it
will
adds
find
up to the experience.
everything will find its use at some point. Like my work for UNHCR. Yeah, I used to do all those, and some country reports were really gruesome, and I found it very hard to work on them. Like when there was when there were all the mass arrests in Turkey, for instance, and you would translate dozens and dozens of pages of all those of that regime's actions and measures, and you would be like, oh my god, that's not happening a few hundred kilometers from here. What is going on? um, or even more uh, gruesome physical atrocities. But it was an experience that truly added to my um, expertise in translating about migrants. And then even when I translated Nadia Murad's book, which was very uh, depressing, yeah, I could do it. I could do it because I'd done it before, and everything that I'd learned so far had built up to that. So nothing you learn is wasted time, and it's never too late.
Yeah, I really like this advice. Indeed. I think it's never too late, and it just requires a bit of effort and stop a moment to really identify what you like, or identify something new that you really like. Perfect then. Thank you so much, Irina. It was lovely talking to you. And I hope to see many more books translated by you. And Yeah, as you well say, never stop learning.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation as well.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
I invite you to follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and all other major platforms. Subscribe, but also share it with persons who might find it useful.